Welcome to RTalk, the place where we agree to disagree. My guest today is Andy Beer. He is here in Sikinos in Greece. Our topic is nomadic life. Hello, Andy. Welcome.
Hello, and thanks for having me here.
And you see how he's looking over here because we are actually in the same room. Wait a minute.
Hi, everyone. We are in the same room.
So, dear viewers, don't be surprised if we look at each other while we talk. True to the title of our art talk today, Andy is here, and we will learn where his next stop is. But before, Andy, I would like to introduce you a little bit to my viewers, please. So, a few words about you. Andy is almost 60 years old, and he is living a nomadic life. And I want to explore with him today what that exactly means. Regarding reading his biography, I guess it all started at the tender age of 25 when Andy met Reiki in Australia, and, to quote him, his dependence on mainstream science as the source of all truth fell by the wayside. The spiritual quest has been central to his life ever since then. And some 20 years ago, he became a Reiki teacher. And in 2010, he started offering satsangs. His work incorporates tantric knowledge and the path of love. When not involved in group processes or in one-to-one sessions, Andy tends to live a simple life, often wandering with a backpack and sleeping outdoors, eating bread and oil, and I can attest to that. He has been ravaging our herb garden out here. And foraging for leaves and berries. He also works from time to time as a hybrid software and reservoir engineer in the oil industry. Andy, I looked at your biography on your webpage and copied all this. Is that fair, or would you like to add something?
No, I think that's a good introduction. Thanks, René. I do have these two sides to my life. One is technical work, which I do from time to time. And then I often take long periods off from doing that sort of work and focus more on the spiritual side of my life, which is the most important part of life for me, very clearly. So when I'm doing the technical work, I'm also maintaining my own spiritual path as best I can. But it certainly gets a lot more intense when I'm not doing the technical work.
I do have still a few questions about your biography. For example, there were some of the words satsang. Well, you're giving satsang for a layperson in a sentence or two. What's satsang?
So it's a meeting of people who are spiritual seekers, usually with a teacher or master present to answer questions. Although satsang can take many different forms. It can be just a gathering in silence, like a meditation together, or some people use music in the same sort of group setting. Literally, it's usually translated as something like sitting in truth or sitting with a master. It comes from Sangha, which is actually like the spiritual community, one of the words, a group of people, spiritual seekers.
I have known you for a long time, and we go back to the 90s when we first met. And of course, you didn't give satsang sessions then. So when later, I can't remember how I learned that, I thought, what a courageous man, going to places like India, which is renowned for gurus giving satsang. And here you are in Hong Kong, you would have been called a long-nosed white devil as a foreigner giving satsang. How you hear a little bit the paradox I'm addressing. How do you deal with that?
Yes, it's a good question, René, and it hasn't been a problem actually, perhaps surprisingly. When I am teaching in India, a lot of the people coming to me are also Westerners, and in a way, we share more common language. So it can be a little bit easier for one Westerner to listen to another Westerner in this sort of work. Of course, there's some great Indian masters and teachers. That's not questioned at all. Sometimes Indians come to me. Sometimes there's that allure of the exotic, or somebody who's got a different view on life. That can also be quite attractive and actually, I think, quite beneficial. So I think it's good that people move around. And also, in terms of listening to spiritual teachings, I've always listened to many different masters and met many different teachers, and I encourage us to do the same.
In fact, I saw on your webpage that you have wisdoms gained, I think, is one of the chapters where you're introducing some of the people you have listened to and learned from. Another quick question. I was intrigued. Hybrid software. What's the hybrid meant to be?
The hybrid in that sentence is actually between two different aspects of my technical work. But obviously, I'm a bigger hybrid between all of that and a spiritual being. In fact, we all are a hybrid of a spiritual being with at least one other thing and probably a whole cluster of things. But actually, it is quite important in my outlook on life to see that I don't define myself just as one thing, and I try not to define other people by just one thing. It's a trap that we fall into. And in fact, that leads us a little bit towards the nomadic life, because we can often define ourselves quite strongly by where we live or where we come from.
Well, I guess accepting that we are a hybrid being, don't want to speak for the rest of humanity, but I certainly share this with you, that in itself opens access to multiple personalities, which in itself is then a nomadic life. But before we get there, in your biography, you said something about a major breakthrough. You did a yoga session. I can't remember now. I think it was in Canada, in the Rockies or someplace, and described that it was a significant breakthrough for you. Still, as part of your biography, give us a few sentences what you meant with that, please.
Yes, a little bit of context. I was traveling at the time, I guess part of my nomadic journey, and I'd been traveling for a year already around the world on that particular journey. And I had settled in a town in the Canadian Rockies called Canmore for a few months largely because I'd met a yoga teacher, Elizabeth Mayer. She called herself a yoga teacher, but actually her teachings were more meditative and spiritual in nature. And after studying with her for some while, she was actually giving me an energy-based, breathing-based treatment, her own thing. And halfway through that, there was some huge release of energy in me. And of course, these talks relate a little bit at least to Reiki usually. And so Reiki has been the central part of my spiritual journey. And of course, Reiki is a form of energy. And with Reiki, I can really to see the whole of life in terms of energy. And that has been an important perspective, a shift in my perspective that happened with Reiki beforehand. And I tend to sense myself as energy, or at least sense energies within my body. And during that particular event, there was a huge release of energy. And I have felt huge releases of energy before and since, and they're all amazing and usually feel great. But in that particular instance, what came to me when that sort of energy turned into a realization in words was that I am not unworthy. And that was quite interesting to me because I hadn't realized, I hadn't been conscious of the fact that I'd been considering myself to be unworthy. So, in a way, I saw something that I hadn't been aware of plus a big shift in that unconscious understanding of myself. And that really had huge ripple effects for years afterwards. And that in that moment, I also sort of felt, wow, this is going to change everything. And it did. I mean, it wasn't the end of the story for me. I still have a lot of baggage to work through and so on. But if I had to hold it down to a single point, I'd say that was the most significant.
Yeah, and the term breakthrough stuck out to me when I read it. Actually, I intend to have an art talk on the very topic of breakthrough sometime in the future. And in my life too, there are certain moments, and I also like to look at them as breakthroughs more so than. I guess it wouldn't be all wrong to call it moments of enlightenment, of clarity. And I think, and I suspect that that is an essential clarity to make such a significant decision, like leading a nomadic life. So I want to spend a little bit of time to what does that mean, a nomadic life? I'm sure my viewers, they say, well, okay, it's the past, I should say past, it's the Corona time, which has shown us that we can do a lot of work from home or simply by taking my laptop with me wherever I travel, and that then becomes like a nomadic worker. Um, but when I did the research on our topic today, a lot dealt with the nomads as the classical people in the Sahara and in other areas in Mongolia who move from place to place, who don't have a place of residence, so to speak. And indeed, yesterday, when I introduced you to two pretty ladies down at the beach, uh, they asked you where you live and where you go. Maybe you tell my viewers what your answer was.
I don't remember the exact words, but basically, I don't have a home in the way most people have a home. By that, I mean I don't have a fixed place that I regard as home. And I think for me, that is one of the key defining factors for a nomadic life. I mean, of course, people can go on holiday from home and travel and see a bit of the world, perhaps go on prolonged travels. But there's a sort of psychological aspect that might would be there. If I'm considering myself to be temporarily away from my home, then it's a different psychological situation than if I don't have that concept of home. And it's important to me because it does change many things in the outlook on life. If I'm just temporarily away from a home, then a part of me is always just waiting for when I go back there. And listen to that phrase, go back. Actually, for me, that's quite telling. Basically, I never go back, is my attitude. And so with that comes more an attitude of letting go. You know, I'm here for the first time visiting René and this beautiful island of Sikinos. Maybe I'll come back in the future, maybe I won't. So when I leave here, a part of that process will be just to let go with great gratitude for beautiful experiences, but also to be able to let go. And I feel that's important because in that letting go, there's a space for the next port of call. You know, where do I go next? Sometimes I have some plan for that, sometimes not. That doesn't matter so much. Either way, can I be open to that new experience? That's part of the nomadic life for me as well.
But that's constantly saying goodbye. You know, to people, you actually will leave from the island tomorrow. And we haven't seen each other for decades, literally. So we will have, my wife and I will go down to the port, we will wave goodbye to you, and you're off into the sunset. Now, let's for a moment not talk about the romantic side of such a picture, but at the emotional side, you're leaving us behind, and you're saying goodbye. And I do know when I'm down at the port and people leave from the island, that happens every day here, and I see how often they're heartbroken and sad. So if every leaving is associated with heartbreak, uh, how's your heart, Andy?
It's been broken many, many times, René. I mean, that is a very good observation. And I feel the difficulty is not so much that it's heartbreaking, but being able to keep going through heartbreak without becoming closed or defensive or avoiding the situation. It's, saying goodbye to company that you've been enjoying is, of course, always, there's always that sadness. But that, of course, is balanced by the joy of having lived those moments and those shared experiences. And of course, I don't forget all that. This is still there in my memory. It's more to do with this aspect of, do I need to attach to something and feel certain that I'm going to go back to it? Or can I appreciate it fully and then, in a way, let go in the sense of being open then to completely new experiences and not relying on being able to repeat what has gone before, because of course we never know. Even if I have a home somewhere, disasters can happen. Things don't turn out the way we expect. Maybe there's an earthquake. I mean, who knows? The list is endless. So in a way, I think it's also more realistic to say goodbye in that letting go away. It doesn't preclude, it doesn't mean I can never come back. Perhaps I will. Probably I will. But it's psychologically, let's say the intention is not to have a dependence on that, not to feel, oh, that's where my home is, so I need to go back there. You see, with the nomadic life, there is this challenge of not really becoming attached to a place, let's say. And when I say a place, this actually applies to many things. It's the same with people, really. Of course, we can relate to each other remotely through these electronic means. So it's not quite so extreme, but it's similar. I mean, hence the heartbreak that I described.
Yeah, and I guess it's a reminder that each time you leave a person or a place, that the separation is actually just an illusion. And you may go away, Andy, but our connection will remain. The question about taking leave and saying goodbye to people has kept me busy for practically all my life, because being somewhat of a kindred spirit, I like to travel a lot. I traveled on a motorbike, and he is here on a motorbike. His next stop is Morocco. So he's going through Ancona and then through the Alps, France, and go all the way to what's the place you're going to?
Spain, Barcelona.
Yeah. So having traveled also like that, and already before that, as a young man, I had discovered something in me that taking leave of somebody was, for me, not so much filled with sadness, grief, or such inverted comma negative feelings, but it was more pregnant with joy and gratitude, and gratitude for what has been, and joy of what's going to come. And actually, it was not seldom that I noticed that I was almost like a little bit ashamed of those feelings as a younger man, because the common behavior is how we take leave from each other. We must be sad. And of course, the ultimate taking leave from each other is when a person dies. And I've noticed so often that when I have accompanied somebody who passed away, that yes, there's this element of grieving and of sadness, but I also always felt there is this tremendous potential for joy, because it reminds me of the essence of life, and I'm not distracted with my broken bicycle or some trivial garbage. And this dilemma of what society is expecting or what is commonly done, and how I personally feel. Do you know what I'm talking about? How do you deal with this, and how do you feel?
Yes, I do understand exactly what you're saying, René, and it's resonating with my own experience, especially. I think you mentioned gratitude at one point, and I think that for me is really a key. If I'm feeling gratitude, then from that gratitude there is a great joy. It goes hand in hand with that gratitude. So feeling that, it's for me that's also a sign that I'm recognizing what great gift, for example, if somebody has died, but what a great gift that they've been a part of my life. Isn't that amazing? That I'm here living this life, and another human being has shared some part of their life with me in whatever way. It could be a passing friendship, a moment, a smile with a stranger in the street, anything. But these are beautiful sharings, and if I'm feeling gratitude for them, it's honoring the other person, I feel. And actually, if I look at the sort of sadness that comes with parting and with grief, I actually feel that if I'm feeling that, it's more a self-pity in a way. I've lost something. I like it. I want it more. I want more of that. So I don't think it's really honoring the other to feel that sadness as much as feeling gratitude and joy is honoring. So I don't worry about what other people think about it too much. I think that's
Yeah, you obviously don't care much about that, and that's of course everyone's preference. And I think that not caring so much about living according to the norms of society and doing your own thing comes at the price. And maybe I don't want to go there now. I want to bring up something else first. But I do want to mention that at this point, we shouldn't glorify this too much. Now, I'm saying agreeing to disagree, and sometimes I'm getting criticized that I'm not enough disagreeing. So I said I'm a kindred spirit. So a lot of what you do and you say resonates strongly with me. But let's look at this at the more critical point of views. Um, and when I was a young man and I went on a motorbike and I traveled around the world, to a great extent it was escapism, running away and finding something new, not dealing with what I've created so far. The question of um, is what you're doing a way of avoiding commitments in relationships, for example, and also is it a way of escapism, which is smacking of an egotistical way of life? I think these are justified questions. And I said at the beginning, you're no longer 25 years old. You're a mature man now. I get a lot away. I could say, well, it was the delusion of a young man to hop on a bike and travel around the world. So do give me some pushback, please, Andy, when I say this is delusions, egotism you're practicing here, and it's avoiding commitment. Yeah, I've said my piece.
great challenge, René.
I hope that's okay for you, Andy.
Absolutely, I'm completely unperturbed by what you just said. And there's an element of truth in it, no doubt. And to kind of put the other perspective on that, commitment, for example, let's start with that. Of course, it could be that I would make a commitment to a specific person. It could be an intimate relationship, or it could be some other situation. Say I'm caring for an elderly, I promise them I'll be there at their bedside until the day they die. Now, that would obviously preclude traveling and running away and escaping, or whatever other angle we want to put on it. So I haven't made such a commitment. That's a choice. And in a way, the way I see it is, I've chosen to commit to something else, which is to explore my spiritual world and potential as profoundly as possible. And in a way, I've just given priority to that. So is that selfish? I don't think so, because the world needs us all to, get a bit less materialistic and a bit more spiritual in our behaviour towards each other and towards the planet. That's needed, no doubt about it. So I don't feel that I'm lacking commitment, and I don't think that the priority of my commitments is ultimately that selfish. So I don't really have any concerns there. But in a practical sense, for sure, a nomadic life makes it very difficult to maintain a very steady, intimate relationship with someone unless people take that journey together as quickly as possible. And I forget the other some of the other points you were mentioning there. So that was
escapism was the other.
Yeah. To me, escapism implies that I'm escaping from something, and obviously a committed relationship could be one such thing, or if I've made a big mess in my life somewhere and I'm just running away from it. I don't really feel that's the case in my own life. I feel especially at this age, I'm feeling a little bit more like in a Hindu tradition, where a man might, at a young age, make some money, then get married, have a family, maybe, which I haven't really done in the conventional sense myself. But anyway, at a sort of older age, he would leave enough money for the family to be okay and just go off alone into the forest for his spiritual journey. And so I see that not as escapism, but as another stage in life. Now, it's a little bit perhaps a misleading analogy in my case, because I started all this at the age of 30 or whatever. So I don't think I can claim that this is a direct analogy. It doesn't feel like escapism to me. I think, there have been some specific things in my life in the past where I'd say, yeah, I probably didn't really handle that in the way that I would now as a more mature person.
Welcome to the club. Okay, yeah. I was looking for a video to show. I like to have a little intercession. I didn't find anything, nomads and so on. But then I looked up because I think this is also to agree a romantic delusion which you're running after, or let me rephrase this. I'm sure that a lot of people would see it that way. So I looked at romantic delusion. And I discovered that there is a psychological phenomenon, erotomania, which is the love. Hold on, I wrote it down. Here it is. I can read it to you. It is a rare disorder in which an individual has a delusional belief that the person of a society higher standing falls in love with him. So for a moment I thought, okay, that's the end of using the idea of a romantic delusion, but of course it is a more romantic idea to some extent. I think you've addressed that already quite convincingly and gave us some insight. But in my thinking, I then thought, well, who is the higher authority in Andy's life who he could have the romantic delusional belief that that person falls in love with him if he lives the life he does? And I don't think there is a human being I could answer that question with, but something like God or creation or the original power Is that why you're doing it? Is that why you're living the life you live? Because you have the romantic delusion that the higher power, God, or whatever you consider to be God, therefore will fall in love, or will, when you're not completely escaped, will permit you entrance?
No. It's an interesting take, really, but I feel that my spiritual journey is not about hoping that God will fall in love with me. Absolutely not. It's more the opposite, maybe hoping I will fall in love with God, if I haven't already, or with nature, or with existence. For me, the spiritual journey is, if it's about anything, it's about letting go of this need to feel separate, like I'm a separate person, a separate entity, and allowing myself to open up, and the boundary between myself, what's me and what's not me, allowing that to melt away. So it's the classic journey with God. But I don't, it would never occur to me to think of that it's God falling in love with me, not at all. I've come from existence, and that's where I'm headed back to. So it's, to me, just removing my own delusions is really what this spiritual journey is about. And with that removal of delusions of separateness, of course, a different life opens up inside myself. But it's no, I don't think it comes into the sort of psychological attitude that you were hinting at there, René.
Okay, I tried. We're coming slowly towards the end of our conversation. Andy, what are your parting thoughts, particularly now? How do you feel? You've enjoyed hospitality of the island of life of me. You're going to leave tomorrow on a boat, going to Piraeus, and then another boat to Ancona. Then you have like 1,000 kilometers or more ahead of you on your motorbike to go to the north of Africa. Um, how are you? How do you feel? How is this conversation? What's the final words you would like to share with us, please?
It's interesting when I've been staying in a place. I've been here a week, and just at the end, of course, the mind starts to think ahead, but that happens less and less for me. It's more and more a case of just being in the moment. So I think this question will be more pertinent tomorrow when I'm about to get on the boat, for example. So it's not really in my consciousness. Of course, I have some practical things to sort out, to book ferries or whatever, but I really don't think about the next week or two. Or, no, it's not needed. So part of being in a nomadic life for me is also allowing me to be more and more present where I am in the moment, whatever that is. And it's just as I was talking earlier about not really clinging on to the past, it's also not so much having an attachment to a particular future. And then my awareness just naturally comes back to today, at least, let's say. So that's one thing. And as we're reaching towards the end, I just want to touch on one other aspect of the nomadic life, and that is to do with comfort, because it's not a comfort, it's not a particularly comfortable life to be always moving and having no security. And I think that's why it wouldn't suit everybody in this very physical sense of the nomadic life. And it's probably the reason that a lot of people would much rather have a home and know where home is, and that's a more comfortable way of being. But if I were to live that myself, I know I'd probably not be strong enough to overcome the tendency to just live life from habit. So for me, the nomadic life is also about living a life where it becomes quite difficult for me to live different habits. And that again forces me to be more present, more aware with the moment, where I am, what's around me. And in also my spiritual life is to just to be present. And that is with the gifts that the nomadic life gives me.
I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I said earlier maybe we should look at the cost, the price you pay for your choice, and you touched on that. And I was, while you were talking, I was thinking that whether we like it or not, in many ways, the modern developments, at least in the workplace, is becoming more nomadic for many of us. And hopefully what you said, particularly now at the end, is also giving some stimulation and maybe even some wisdom for people when they deal with their everyday nomadic, at least professional life. So thank you very much for that, Andy. Anything else?
Just a big thank you to you, René. It's been a treat to be here on Sikidos with you, that's for sure.
Oh, well, it has been a treat to have you here, and we can do something very exceptional. I can move over to you and we sort of say goodbye to everyone like that. Thank you very much for having watched. I'll run back and show you the jingle. Thank you, Andy. This was a great talk. Bye-bye, Andy. Bye, dear viewers. And of course, if you can, please subscribe please subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.